Code black at the nursery. Every predator cub just synchronized their attention on the same target, and it's not food, not threat. It's the human maintenance worker who just raised his hand. Kael'thas slammed his primary manipulator against the emergency lockdown panel. His secondary arms already pulling up containment protocols across every holographic display in the Observation Command Center. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. 217 juvenile apex predators from 47 different worlds had just done something that violated every principle of evolutionary biology he'd spent 3 decades studying. They'd responded to the same stimulus simultaneously. "Zara, tell me you're seeing this," he barked into the comm, his throat sacs pulsing with barely controlled panic. "Confirmed." The Colothian security director's voice crackled back, sharp as broken glass. All sectors showing identical behavior. Vraxian shadow stalkers, Colothian razor wings, Tharn acid spitters, even the Corvin bone crushers we just acquired last cycle. Every single cub locked on target. I'm declaring level 5 containment breach possibility and evacuating all observation decks. Kael'thas zoomed in on the central nursery's primary display, his 3 eyes struggling to process what they were witnessing. There, in the middle of the chamber, standing on a maintenance ladder with a tool belt hanging loosely around his waist, was James Wilson, the human, the facility's maintenance technician, the utterly ordinary, perpetually coffee-drinking, constantly joking biped who'd been fixing their environmental systems for the past 8 months. And his hand was raised. Just raised, reaching toward a ceiling panel where a light had been flickering for the past 3 shifts. That was it. That was the stimulus that had caused 200 juvenile killing machines, creatures that had evolved on worlds separated by thousands of light years, that had never shared a common ancestor, that had developed under completely different environmental pressures, to stop everything they were doing and stare at him with absolute, unwavering focus. "This is impossible," Kael'thas whispered, his voice cracking. "Cross-species behavioral synchronization doesn't exist. It cannot exist. These cubs have 0 shared evolutionary history. The Vraxians evolved from ambush predators in dense jungle canopies. The Tharn developed in acidic underground cave systems. The Colothians are avian pursuit hunters from high-altitude mountain ranges. There is no universal predator response pattern that spans." "Chief, he's moving again," one of his junior xenobiologists interrupted, her voice pitching higher with each word. On screen, James Wilson lowered his hand, completely oblivious to the galactic security crisis unfolding around him, and reached into his tool belt for a wire stripper. The instant his hand came down, every single predator cub in the facility resumed their previous activities. The shadow stalkers went back to stalking their automated prey simulations. The razor wings returned to their territorial dominance displays. The acid spitters continued their hunting practice with the reinforced target drones. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just simultaneously violated fundamental laws of behavioral evolution. "Get me facility-wide comms," Zara snapped. "Now." Kael'thas watched, his academic mind fracturing at the edges, as the human, completely unaware of the chaos he'd triggered, started humming something while examining the wiring in the ceiling panel. The cubs weren't watching him anymore, but Kael'thas could see it in their postures, their positioning. They were aware of him, tracking him peripherally, waiting. "This changes everything," he breathed. If a human can somehow trigger universal cross-species predator responses, if they can command attention from creatures that evolved to be commanded by nothing. "Zara, The implications for galactic security are... I know. She cut him off, her tone grim. If humans can control predators across evolutionary boundaries, every military, every research facility, every conservation program in the galaxy needs to know. Immediately. Attention all staff. Zara's voice boomed through every speaker in the facility. Code Black active. All personnel maintain minimum safe distance from human worker James Wilson. Do not attempt to interact. Do not approach. Xenobiology Crisis Team to Observation Command immediately. This is not a drill. On the monitor, James Wilson paused his work, tool in hand, and looked around in confusion. His voice came through the audio pickup, casual and slightly amused. I'm kind of in the middle of something here. Did someone spill something hazardous again? Because I told maintenance that the containment seals on the Tharn feeding systems needed. He stopped talking abruptly. Kyle Thas's heart seized as he realized why. Every predator cub in visual range was staring at the human again, not moving, not threatening, just watching, waiting. And James Wilson, maintenance technician, coffee enthusiast, the human who'd somehow become the most dangerous individual in the facility without knowing it, just shrugged and went back to his wiring. Get me the Galactic Predator Institute headquarters, Kael'thas said quietly, his voice hollow. We have a situation that's going to rewrite every protocol in the database. James Wilson, this is Chief Xenobiologist Kael'thas. Do not move. Do not make any sudden gestures. Remain exactly where you are. Through the audio feed, Kael'thas heard the human sigh, actually sigh, like this was a minor inconvenience rather than a galaxy-shaking crisis. Okay, but I'm literally standing on a ladder with exposed wiring in my hands. James called out, his voice echoing through the nursery chamber. And the sterilization cycle starts in 20 minutes. If I don't finish this repair, the whole decontamination sequence is going to fry. These circuits and emergency xenobiology team deployed to Nursery Sector 7. Zara overrode him, her claws flying across tactical displays. Full protective gear. Assume unknown biohazard protocols. Kael'thas watched the monitors obsessively as James shifted his weight on the ladder, reaching to secure a wire. The moment he moved, just a simple adjustment of posture, every cub's head tracked him. Not with predatory intent, not with aggression, with attention, complete, unwavering, cross-species attention. Run it again. Kael'thas ordered his junior staff. I need someone else to raise their hand. Same gesture, same position. On the lower observation deck, a Vraxian handler nervously lifted his primary manipulator, mimicking the human's earlier movement as precisely as his anatomy allowed. The cubs didn't even glance at him. A Colothian researcher tried next, extending her wing arm upward. Nothing. A Tharn supervisor raised 3 of his appendages simultaneously. The predator cubs continued their activities, completely disinterested. It's specific to the human. Kael'thas breathed, his world tilting on its axis. It's not the gesture itself. It's him. Chief, look at this. His lead analyst threw a holographic scan into the center display. Zara's security suite ran every conceivable analysis. No unusual pheromone signatures, no subsonic vocalizations, no electromagnetic emissions, no quantum entanglement markers, no psionic resonance, nothing. The human is baseline standard in every measurable parameter. James, apparently tired of being ignored, experimentally raised his hand again, this time just to scratch his head. 217 predator cubs froze, focused, locked on. Oh, come on, James muttered. lowering his hand and watching as the cubs resumed their previous behaviors. That's just weird. Baseline standard, Kael'thas repeated numbly, staring at the data. He's doing nothing. He's nothing exceptional by any metric we can measure, and yet... Chief, Zara interrupted, her voice tight. You need to see this. I'm pulling up comparison footage from 3 days ago when Handler Taven entered the nursery. The split screen showed James's current interaction alongside the archived footage. Handler Taven, a decorated specialist with 15 years of predator management experience, had entered the same chamber to conduct routine health assessments. The cubs had been defensive, territorial, maintaining careful distance while displaying warning behaviors. James Wilson walked through the same space like he was strolling through a park. The cubs, the same individual cubs that had kept Taven at a cautious distance, oriented toward the human like he was the center of their universe. Consult the behavioral databases, Kael'thas demanded, his throat sacs constricting. All of them, Vraxian, Colothian, Tharn, Corvin, every species in this facility. Find me one precedent for this type of cross-species recognition pattern. His team worked frantically, pulling up 14 different planetary databases, 2 million years of compiled evolutionary research, thousands of documented predator behavioral studies. Nothing. Not one single match. Look, I really need to finish this wiring before the sterilization cycle. James called out again, starting to climb down the ladder. This is a safety issue. If those circuits short during decon, you're looking at a facility-wide power. He fumbled his wrench. It tumbled from his grip, clattering against the metal ladder with a sharp clang before hitting the floor. Every single predator cub in the facility tracked the sound in perfect unison. Their heads moved as one, following the wrench's trajectory with synchronized precision that made Kael'thas's primary heart skip. Impossible, he whispered. That's coordination. That's pack awareness. These species don't have pack structures. Half of them are solitary hunters. The other half have species-specific hierarchy systems that are mutually incompatible. They can't. They shouldn't. Director Vexthul is calling an emergency council meeting. Zara reported, her usually steady voice wavering. Galactic Predator Institute headquarters is sending their senior xenobiologists. They're demanding an explanation for how a human maintenance worker bypassed 2 million years of separate evolutionary development. James bent to pick up his wrench, and Kael'thas saw something that made his blood run cold. The Tharn acid spitters, the juveniles that had killed 3 handlers last year, the ones they kept in reinforced isolation because of their extreme aggression, were pressed against their containment barriers, completely docile, watching the human with what could only be described as trust. I'm going to the equipment locker, James announced, apparently done waiting for permission. I need a different wire gauge for this repair. He took one step toward the exit. Every cub in visual range made a sound, not an aggressive sound, not a territorial warning, a distress call, the specific vocalization that cubs made when separated from... No, Kael'thas said aloud, his academic certainty crumbling. No, that's not possible. They're not... He's not there. James paused, looking around in confusion. Are they okay? They sound upset. 217 apex predators from 47 different worlds were making distress calls because a human maintenance worker was walking away from them. The senior xenobiologists burst into the Observation Command Center, emergency authorization codes flashing on their credentials. They watched the monitors in absolute silence. Nobody had an explanation. The emergency response team from Galactic Predator Institute headquarters materialized via quantum gate within 2 hours. their expressions ranging from skeptical to horrified as they reviewed the footage. Kyle Tass had confined James to the observation lounge. With the coffee the human had specifically requested, because apparently galactic security crises required caffeine. While the experts assembled, Vexia, the Institute's lead predator behavioral specialist, stood with her sensory ridges fully extended, watching the monitors where 217 predator cubs remained pressed against their containment barriers, tracking James's every movement through the transparent aluminum viewing ports. "This violates every principle of predator independence development," she said flatly, her translator barely keeping pace with her rapid-fire analysis. "Juvenile apex predators are evolutionarily programmed for self-sufficiency. They don't form attachment bonds outside their species-specific parameters. They certainly don't recognize cross-species authority figures. This is fundamentally impossible." James, slouched in a chair with his coffee, actually chuckled. "They're just babies," he said, gesturing toward the monitors with his cup. "Babies look at caregivers. It's not rocket science." Jotaro, the facility's consulting evolutionary biologist, bristled all four of his dorsal spines. "Those are not babies, human. Those are apex predators, killing machines. Each one of those cubs has the capacity to disembowel an adult of most species. The Tharn acid spitters have a 97% lethality rate in direct confrontation. The Vraxian shadow stalkers possess venom that can... Yeah, super dangerous. I get it." James interrupted, setting down his coffee. "But they're also juveniles, separated from their parents, stuck in an artificial environment with a bunch of aliens who are terrified of them. Of course, they're looking for someone who isn't scared." Kyle Tass watched Vexia's expression shift from certainty to confusion. "The cubs are making vocalizations," she said slowly, pulling up audio analysis. "Frequency patterns consistent across all species, despite different vocal structures." "Those are lonely sounds," James said simply. "You know, the noises scared kids make when they want comfort." The observation lounge went silent. "We've cataloged those vocalizations for years," Zara said quietly, pulling up decades of audio files. "Classified them as territorial warnings, feeding aggression indicators, dominance displays. You've been categorizing distress calls as aggression." James stood up, moving closer to the viewing port. Every cub in the facility tracked his movement, their previous agitation visibly calming. "You've been treating them like specimens instead of scared kids. They're predators, not children," Jotaro protested, but his voice lacked conviction. His worldview was cracking. Kyle Tass could see it happening in real time, the same way his own had shattered hours earlier. James walked right up to the containment barrier, separating the observation lounge from the main nursery. The cubs surged forward, not aggressively, but eagerly, pressing against their side of the transparent barrier like they were trying to get closer to him. "Hey guys," James said softly through the intercom, his voice gentle. "You doing okay?" The cubs responded, not with the cataloged territorial warnings or aggression indicators, with soft chirps, purrs, and low rumbles that the facility's audio systems had never properly categorized because nobody had thought to listen for comfort sounds. "Oh no," Vexia breathed, her sensory ridges going flat against her skull. "Oh no, we've been managing them through fear protocols. Standard apex predator containment procedures. We've been treating them as threats to be controlled rather than babies who need care," James finished. "Look, I'm not a scientist, but even I know that predators have families. They have pack structures, pride dynamics, pod hierarchies. You really thought these cubs would just, what, raise themselves without any emotional support? Kailthas pulled up the facility records with trembling manipulators. Our cub mortality rate, he said hollowly. 34% from stress-related conditions. Failure to thrive. Aggressive episodes resulting in termination. We attributed it to the difficulty of raising apex predators in captivity. Yeah, because you're terrifying them instead of raising them, James said, his tone a mix of exasperation and sadness. They're not just eating and sleeping machines. They're kids. Scared, confused kids from 47 different worlds who have no idea why they're here or why everyone's afraid of them. Jotaro sat down heavily, his entire theoretical framework collapsing. Predators need emotional support, he whispered. Not just nutritional requirements and environmental enrichment. They need family, care, recognition. And somehow, Vexia said, staring at James like he was an alien artifact she couldn't classify. Every single one of them recognizes you as that caregiver, across 47 different evolutionary paths. How? James shrugged, picking up his coffee again. Pack bonding. Humans are pretty good at adopting things. We domesticated wolves into dogs, made friends with cats, keep everything from birds to reptiles as pets. Maybe we just, I don't know, signal safe adult in some universal way. Through the viewing port, 217 predator cubs from every corner of the galaxy watched the human with absolute trust, finally calm for the first time since their arrival at the facility. The paradigm had completely collapsed. Everything the galactic scientific community thought they knew about predator development was wrong. I need you to demonstrate your methodology, Kailthas said, his voice steady despite the academic collapse happening behind his eyes. Show us what you're doing that we've failed to do for decades. James set down his coffee cup. You want me to go in there? Yes. Into the containment area, with the predators? Yes. The ones you've been telling me are super dangerous killing machines for the past 8 months. Yes. James shrugged. Okay. Zara's claws slammed onto the emergency override panel. Absolutely not. There are 247 safety protocols that explicitly forbid. Override them, Kailthas said quietly. Chief, I will not be responsible for... Then I'll take responsibility. Open the containment. James walked through the decontamination airlock like he was entering a break room, not a chamber filled with the galaxy's most dangerous juvenile predators. Zara's hand hovered over the emergency stun grid activation, her entire body coiled with tension. The human sat down on the floor. Just sat down, cross-legged, in the middle of the nursery. Hey guys, he said calmly, his voice carrying that same gentle tone from earlier. You doing okay? The cubs approached slowly, cautiously. The Vraxian shadow stalkers crept forward on silent paws. The Colothian razor wings descended from their perches with careful precision. The Tharn acid spitters, the ones that had killed 3 handlers last year, the ones kept in maximum isolation, emerged from their reinforced enclosures. James didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there, patient and still, letting them come to him. The Tharn cub reached him first, its toxic glands visibly active, acid dripping from specialized pores. Every alarm in Zara's security suite was screaming. The cub lowered its head, extended its sensory appendages, and gently nuzzled James's outstretched hand. See? James said softly, carefully stroking the cub's armored plating. They just wanted someone to not be scared of them. In the observation lounge, Vexia made a sound like her species made when their fundamental reality shattered. Human child-rearing instincts translate to all juvenile creatures. James explained, his voice calm as more cubs gathered around him. It's not magic. You stay calm, you show them you're not a threat, you give them consistent attention. They're babies. They respond to caregiving behavior. A Vraxian cub climbed onto his lap. A Colothian settled on his shoulder. The Tharn pressed against his side, purring in contentment. Soft voice, confident posture, patient attention, James continued, demonstrating each principle. You don't crowd them. You let them set the pace. You recognize when they're scared versus when they're playing. It's the same stuff you do with any kid. But they're from 47 different worlds, Jotaro whispered, watching through the viewing port. Different evolutionary backgrounds, different predator development cycles, different biology, same basic needs. James interrupted gently, now surrounded by a mixed species pile of predator cubs. Safety, recognition, care. That's universal for juveniles, right? At least, that's how it works with human kids. And apparently, he gestured to the cubs nestled against him. It works with everyone else's. Kids, too. Kyle Thas pulled up comparative data with shaking manipulators. Earth Zoological Facilities, he read aloud. Predator cub survival rate, 99.8%. Galactic standard, 66%. We assumed humans had superior containment technology. We just treat them like children, James said, laughing as a Corvin cub playfully batted at his hair. Because they are children. You've been overthinking this for decades. He demonstrated basic comfort techniques that any human parent would recognize. Gentle touch in species-appropriate zones, speaking patterns that conveyed calm authority, play engagement that built trust. Each species responded differently in execution, but identically in outcome. Relaxation, trust, contentment. Universal juvenile attachment, Vexia breathed. Humans evolved child-rearing instincts that accidentally work across evolutionary boundaries because the fundamental needs of developing predators are the same everywhere. Pack bonding on a cosmic scale, Zara added, slowly removing her hand from the emergency controls. Humans became cross-species parental figures because you raised your own young with such intensive care that the signals read as safe caregiver to everything. James gently extracted himself from the pile of cubs, standing up slowly. They didn't panic or cling. They watched him go with calm confidence, the way secure children watch trusted parents move about. Rewrite every protocol, Kael'thas ordered, his voice carrying throughout the facility. Emotional support requirements, caregiver interaction standards, stress recognition parameters, everything. We're not running containment facilities anymore. We're running nurseries. James brushed cub fur and scales off his maintenance uniform. Cool. Can I finish fixing that wiring now? Because the sterilization cycle really is going to be a problem if... Every cub in the facility made a soft, contented sound. The human had just rewritten galactic predator management protocols by treating babies like babies. The facility-wide emergency protocols were replaced within 48 hours. What had been maximum containment procedures for apex predator juveniles became simply human caregiver methodology, a comprehensive guide to emotional support in multi-species nursery environments. Director Vex Thule offered James the position of Chief Juvenile Care Consultant, with a salary that made Kyle Thas's compensation look like an intern's stipend. James turned it down. I'm still fixing the lights though, right? He asked, genuinely concerned. Because that panel's a fire hazard, and if nobody's addressed the moisture buildup in the environmental systems, You're looking at a fungal contamination issue by next month. They compromised. James remained the facility maintenance technician, with a significant raise, and agreed to train the xenobiology staff in basic human parenting principles for 2 hours every other day. The Harvard training sessions were awkward at first. Kyle Thas watched Vraxian handlers attempting gentle touch with their manipulators, Colothian researchers practicing soft vocalizations through translator units, Tharn supervisors learning to recognize distress versus play behavior in species they'd studied for years but never truly understood. Emotional recognition protocols, Kyle Thas announced during the first staff meeting under the new paradigm. We will document every vocalization, every behavioral pattern, every interaction through the lens of juvenile emotional needs, rather than threat assessment. Zara restructured the entire security apparatus. Maximum containment barriers were replaced with comfort spaces. Isolation chambers became nursery pods with visual access to caregivers. Motion-triggered stun grids were removed in favor of enrichment activity zones. The facility mortality rate dropped to 2% within 3 weeks. The Galactic Predator Institute sent emergency requests to over 200 facilities across known space. Acquire human consultants immediately. Previous containment methodologies obsolete. James's training methodology was simple, almost laughably so to species that had spent centuries developing complex predator management theories. Listen to them. He instructed a class of senior xenobiologists who had more advanced degrees than James had years of life. Actually listen. That sound. That's I'm hungry. That one? I'm scared. That one? I want to play. You've been cataloging sounds for decades without asking what they meant. He demonstrated comfort techniques, how to approach cubs without triggering defense responses, how to establish routine so they felt secure, how to recognize when they needed space versus when they needed contact. The alien caregivers improved gradually, their movements becoming less clinical and more nurturing. A Vraxian handler named Zilax broke down in tears, a profound physiological response for his species. When a shadow stalker cub that had been categorized as terminally aggressive curled up in his arms for the first time. It trusts me, Zilax whispered. After 8 months of failed intervention protocols, it finally trusts me. James's raised hand gesture became a facility standard, not because of any mystical human power, but because the gesture combined with genuine care created a universal signal. I see you. I recognize you. I'm here for you. When additional human consultants arrived from Earth, zoologists, child psychologists, veterinary specialists, the cubs responded to all of them with the same instinctive recognition. It wasn't James specifically. It was humans. The species that had evolved such intensive parenting instincts that their caregiving signals registered across evolutionary boundaries. We're mega-nurturers, Vexia explained in her official report to the Galactic Institute. Humans didn't become apex predators through superior weaponry or advanced technology. They survived by developing the most sophisticated child-rearing instincts in known space. They bond with everything because they evolved to raise incredibly vulnerable young in hostile environments. Every juvenile creature recognizes those parental signals instinctively. The cosmic implications rippled across every research facility, conservation program, and xenobiology department in the galaxy. Humans hadn't just domesticated wolves and cats on Earth. They'd accidentally become universal caregiver figures for every species they encountered. 3 months after the incident, James was back on his maintenance ladder, whistling an old Earth song while finishing the wiring repair that had started everything. Below him, 217 predator cubs from 47 different worlds played, ate, and rested in spaces designed for comfort rather than containment. Occasionally, a cub would look up at him, check that he was still there, then return to their activities, secure in the knowledge that their human was nearby. "Anyone need anything before I go?" James called out as he packed up his tools. "No? Cool. Stay out of trouble, guys." The cubs settled contentedly, making soft sounds that the facility now properly recognized as expressions of peace and security. For the first time in the Interstellar Predator Conservation Institute's history, every juvenile in their care was thriving. Kyle Thas stood in the observation lounge, watching James climb down his ladder while cubs tracked his movement with calm interest rather than distress. "Document everything," he told his staff, his voice carrying wonder rather than scientific detachment. "Humans just solved our oldest problem by treating children like children. The universe will never be the same." James Wilson, maintenance technician, coffee enthusiast, and accidental revolutionary, grabbed his tool belt and headed toward the environmental systems. He had moisture sensors to check, and if nobody fixed the ventilation in Sector 3 soon, they'd have serious problems. Behind him, the cubs watched protectively, the way children watched parents they trusted completely. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth. Predators needed love too, and humans, without even trying, provided it automatically.